I learned it before I learned how to speak my mind. In our house, the loud ones were loved more. My brother's opinions echoed through every room. My mother's emotions decided the weather of the day. My father's silence was authority. And me? I existed in the spaces between them, careful not to disturb the balance I never created. From the outside, we looked perfect. Respectable family, big house, smiles at gatherings. Inside, roles were assigned early, and mine was simple: be good, be quiet, be grateful. I was praised for obedience, not for effort. Look how understanding she is, my mother would say. Like patience was my greatest achievement. See? She never complains, my father would add, as if my silence proved my strength. I believed them. I believed being low maintenance made me valuable. Growing up, I learned how to read rooms faster than books. I knew when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. I knew when my brother's temper was about to explode and when my mother needed agreement, not honesty. I became skilled at disappearing emotionally while still being physically present. At school, teachers called me mature. Friends said I was easygoing. No one asked what it cost me. I thought loyalty would protect me. I thought love was earned through endurance. When my brother failed, it was stress. When I succeeded, it was luck. I didn't fight it. I didn't demand fairness. I told myself that families weren't competitions, that my time would come. That being dependable meant something. My father and I shared quiet moments. He wasn't cruel, just distant. He provided, corrected, nodded when I spoke. Sometimes that nod felt like approval. I clung to it like proof that I mattered. As he aged, I took on more responsibility without being asked. Doctor appointments, paperwork, late-night medication reminders. I didn't announce my sacrifices. I assumed they were seen. Silence makes you generous with assumptions. My brother, on the other hand, demanded attention like oxygen. Arguments followed him everywhere, yet somehow he remained the center, the future, the heir. The one discussed in whispers about potential. No one ever asked what I wanted, and I never volunteered the answer. After my father's health began to decline, the house changed. Conversations lowered. Doors closed more often. Decisions were made in rooms I wasn't invited into. I noticed, but I didn't question it. I told myself it was temporary, that things would return to normal. They never do. One evening, I overheard my mother talking on the phone in the kitchen. She's strong, she said. She understand. That sentence followed me for days. I started to feel like understanding was my burden alone. Like resilience was expected, not admired. When relatives visited, they asked about my brother's plans, his future, his stress. They asked me if I was helping enough. I smiled. Of course. Inside, something small began to fracture, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet crack like ice under careful footsteps. My father never spoke to me about the future. No conversations. About security, no reassurance. I assumed it was because he trusted me. Because I didn't need instructions. That assumption would cost me everything. The day the lawyer visited, I wore black without realizing why. Maybe my body knew before my mind did. The living room felt colder, heavier. My brother sat confidently, arms crossed. My mother kept adjusting her scarf. I stayed near the window. The lawyer read names, numbers, allocations. My mother's extended relatives, even charities. Each sentence landed like a stamp of finality. I waited for my name to echo in the room. It never did. At first, I thought I missed it. That silence had tricked me again. I looked up, confused, heart beating too fast. The lawyer cleared his throat and continued. That was when I understood something. Terrifying. Silence doesn't protect you. It prepares people to forget you. My mother didn't look at me. My brother's lips curved into something that wasn't a smile. My father's chair sat empty, yet his absence spoke louder than his presence ever had. I wanted to ask a question. Any question, but years of swallowing words don't disappear in moments like this. The meeting ended politely, chairs scraped, papers shuffled. Life moved forward without me. As people stood up, the lawyer paused, glanced at me, then looked away. That small gesture hurt more than the omission itself. It confirmed what I feared. This wasn't an accident. I stepped outside for air. The sky was gray, unmoved by my shock. Cars passed. Neighbors laughed. The world didn't pause for daughters who were never loud enough. I told myself not to cry, not yet, because somewhere between the skipped name and the closed folder, a new realization settled in my chest, heavy, irreversible. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased, and as I stood there, breathing in cold air, I had no idea that the people who underestimated my silence had just created the most dangerous thing of all, a woman with nothing left to lose. I used to think endings were loud, final, marked by tears or dramatic exits, but this one arrived quietly, like a deep breath after years of holding it in. Life didn't transform overnight. It softened. Mornings became gentler. I stopped checking my phone the moment I woke up, stopped bracing myself for disappointment before the day even began. I learned to stretch, to sit with my coffee until it cooled, to let silence exist without filling it with worry. Healing wasn't exciting. It was steady. At the bookstore, people started recognizing me not as someone's daughter, or someone's almost wife, or someone's former friend, but as myself, a woman with opinions, with boundaries, with a calm confidence that didn't ask permission. One afternoon, a young girl lingered after a reading. "How did you know when to leave?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. "You don't," I finally said. "You just get tired of disappearing." She nodded like she understood, even if she hadn't lived it yet. That night, alone in my apartment, I stood in front of the mirror. I noticed things I hadn't before, the way my shoulders sat straighter, the way my eyes didn't look apologetic anymore. I wasn't unbroken. I was rebuilt. Daniel, and I moved slowly. Intentionally. No promises carved into stone, no rushing toward labels, just honesty, just presence. When I flinched, he noticed. When I pulled back, he waited. Love felt different when it wasn't trying to replace something. Sometimes memories still visited. The wedding photos surfaced online. Smiling faces, perfect lighting, a life that looked complete from the outside. I didn't zoom in, I didn't compare. Comparison, I learned, is just another form of self-abandonment. My mother and I spoke more openly now. Not perfectly, but truthfully. She stopped pretending she knew what was best for me. I stopped waiting for her approval. We met in the middle, two women learning how to respect each other without control. One evening, while closing the shop, I found an old note tucked between pages of a book, my handwriting. "Years ago, don't lose yourself for love." I laughed softly. I had lost myself completely, but I had also found my way back. The city outside buzzed with the same energy it always had, people chasing, holding on, letting go. I realized something then. Not everyone gets a dramatic revenge. Not everyone gets an apology. Not everyone gets justice, the way movies promise. Some of us just get peace, and that's enough. As I locked up and stepped into the cool night air, I felt something rare settle inside me. Not excitement. Not fear. Not longing. Contentment. My story didn't need another twist. It didn't need witnesses, because the greatest ending wasn't proving them wrong. It was proving to myself that I could live honestly and freely after everything they took, and I did. Quietly. Bravely. On my own terms. I didn't leave with a goodbye. I left with a quiet understanding that no one would stop me. The house felt different once I decided I was no longer staying for their comfort. The walls no longer pressed in. They loosened like they'd been waiting for me to claim space. Every step I took felt intentional, even when I moved slowly, even when my hands trembled. I chose an early morning, the kind where the city is still yawning and secrets feel lighter to carry. My mother was asleep. My brother's car wasn't in the driveway. Fate, for once, didn't argue. I paused at the door, keys in hand, and listened. No voices, no laughter. No one saying my name. That was the proof I needed. Outside, the air was sharp and honest. It stung my lungs, but it also woke me up. I stood, longer than necessary, letting the cold reset me, letting the girl who begged for fairness dissolve into the woman who would stop asking. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew where I wasn't welcome. The bus ride was quiet. Strangers sat with their own private losses, eyes fixed on windows, phones, nowhere. I felt invisible among them, and for the first time, that invisibility didn't hurt. It protected me. I found a small room to rent near the edge of the city. Peeling paint, a window that rattled when buses passed. A mattress that had lived more lives than I had. It wasn't home. But it was mine. That first night alone I didn't unpack. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed and let the silence settle. Not the suffocating silence of being ignored, but the clean kind. The kind that asks, "Who are you when no one is watching?" The answer didn't come immediately. Instead, memories tried to reclaim me. My mother's voice correcting. My tone, my brother's shadow filling rooms I used to occupy. The version of myself that learned to be agreeable before she learned to be brave. I pressed my palms into my eyes until the images blurred. "No," I whispered. "Not anymore." The next morning, I made a list. Not dreams, not revenge. Just facts. What I had, what I needed, what I refused to lose again. I had a degree, experience, a reputation for being reliable, quiet, easy to manage. I smiled bitterly at that last one. Being underestimated, I realized, had benefits. I applied for jobs relentlessly. I tailored my resume, rehearsed interviews, forced confidence into my voice. When recruiters asked about my background, I spoke. Carefully enough truth to sound grounded, not enough to sound broken. One woman asked, "Why are you looking for a fresh start?" I paused, then said, "Because I've outgrown where I was." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Weeks passed. My bank balance thinned. Doubt crept in at night, whispering that I had made a mistake. That pride wouldn't keep me warm. That I should apologize, return, accept my place. Those nights were the hardest. I would lie awake listening to traffic, counting breaths, reminding myself why I left. Not because I hated them, but because I was disappearing inside that house. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. My mother's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Again. Finally, a message arrived. "Are you safe?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, "Yes. Nothing else." She replied minutes later, "Come home. We can talk. The word felt hollow now. I didn't respond. That evening, I got the call I'd been waiting for. A job offer. Not glamorous. Not powerful. But stable, mine. I cried then, quietly, with my face buried in a pillow so no one would hear. Not because I'd won, but because I'd survived long enough to be offered a chance. Work consumed me. I arrived early. Stayed late, learned systems no one else wanted to understand. I listened more than I spoke. Observed how power moved. How decisions were made behind polite smiles. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was trying to learn the rules of a game I'd never been taught. At night, I studied finance, contracts, negotiation, things no one in my family ever explained because they assumed I wouldn't need them. I began to change. Not outwardly. Inside. I stopped explaining myself, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped waiting for permission. One evening, after a long shift, I caught my reflection in a darkened shop window. Tired eyes, straighter posture. Something sharper. Behind my gaze, I barely recognized her. "You're still here," I said softly. She didn't look fragile anymore. Months passed without contact. Then my brother messaged, "Mom's worried." "You've made your point." I laughed out loud on a crowded train, startling the man beside me. My point. They still thought this was a tantrum. I typed back, "I'm not proving anything. I'm building something." He never replied. The truth settled in slowly, like dust after demolition. I wasn't running away. I was clearing space. Space for mistakes that were mine, wins that no one could take credit for. A future that didn't require shrinking. I didn't miss them the way I expected. I missed the idea of who they could have been. That grief lingered, but it no longer controlled me. One night, as I locked my apartment door after work, I realized something quietly monumental. They had taken my place in the family, but I had taken back my life, and somewhere deep inside, a new resolve formed, steady and patient. I wouldn't return to confront them. I wouldn't demand apologies. If our paths crossed again, it wouldn't be because I needed closure. It would be because my absence had become impossible to ignore. And that thought That thought finally let me sleep. Success didn't arrive loudly. It crept in quietly, the way strength does when no one is watching. By the time I realized my life had changed, it was already unrecognizable. The mornings were fuller, the nights were calmer. I woke up with purpose. Instead of panic, I no longer checked my phone hoping for validation from people who had already chosen life without me. Work became my sanctuary, not because I loved every task, but because I loved who I was becoming while doing them. I learned how decisions were made in rooms I wasn't invited into yet. I noticed who spoke with authority and who borrowed it. I watched how confidence, not volume, controlled outcomes. People started trusting me. At first, it was small things. Can you handle this report? Can you sit in on this meeting? We value your judgment. Each sentence stitched a piece of me back together. I upgraded my apartment, nothing extravagant, just enough space to breathe. White walls, a desk by the window, a mirror that reflected a woman who no longer looked like she was apologizing for existing. I bought clothes that fit my life now, not my past, tailored, neutral, intentional. When I walked into rooms, people noticed not because I demanded attention, but because I no longer hid. Sometimes, late at night, memories tried to resurface. My mother's disappointment, my brother's entitlement, the unspoken rule that I should always adjust, but those thoughts didn't stay long anymore. They had lost their power over a woman who paid her own rent, signed her own contracts, and chose her own silence. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office. We're restructuring, she said carefully, and we want you leading the new team. My heart raced, but my voice didn't shake. I'm ready, I said. She smiled. I know. That night I celebrated alone. Takeout on the floor, music playing softly, a glass raised to no one but myself. I did this, I whispered. Them. Not. Luck. Me. Weeks later, a familiar name appeared in my inbox. My mother. We heard you're doing well, the message read. We're proud of you. I stared at the screen, emotions tangling inside me. Pride, anger, sadness, all competing for space. I didn't reply. Their pride came too late. It arrived after the hardest nights, the quiet breakdowns, the moments I almost gave up. I had learned something crucial in their absence. Approval given after survival feels empty. I heard through mutual contacts that my brother was struggling, his job unstable, his confidence brittle without someone to lean on. The golden child, without a spotlight. For a moment, guilt knocked on my chest. Then I remembered how easily they watched me leave. Guilt left quietly. I started speaking less about my past. Not because I was ashamed, but because it no longer defined me. My story had shifted from endurance to intention. At a networking event, someone asked where I learned to negotiate so well. I smiled. Practice. I didn't say that I learned it by surviving people who tried to make me smaller. Time passed. Promotions followed. My name carried weight in rooms it once never entered. I wasn't chasing recognition. I was earning respect. One evening, while reviewing contracts at my desk, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. Is this you? My brother asked, unsure. Yes, I said calmly. There was a pause. Mom wants to see you. Things aren't the same without you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights outside my window. They were fine when I left, I replied. I'm fine now, too. Silence. You've changed, he finally said. I smiled. That was the point. After the call ended, I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. I understood something clearly for the first time. My growth wasn't meant to punish them. It was meant to save me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't replaceable. And whether they acknowledged it or not, the balance had shifted. The girl who disappeared quietly had returned, as a woman who no longer needed permission to exist. And deep down, I sensed it. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment before they finally realized Edwo they had underestimated. They didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because they finally needed me. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It was a polite message, carefully worded, pretending time had softened everything. My mother asked how I was sleeping, as if rest had ever been her concern. She mentioned the weather, my health, anything except the years she watched me disappear. I read the message twice. Then once more, I felt nothing that scared me more than anger ever did. I agreed to meet her in a public cafe, neutral ground. No childhood walls, no family photos judging me from frames. I arrived early, ordered coffee, and chose a seat where my back was straight and my hands didn't tremble when she walked in. She looked older, smaller. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a tight smile. "You look different," she said, sitting down. "So do you," I replied. She wrapped her hands around her cup like it was something fragile. "We've been worried about you," I almost laughed. Worried people don't stay silent for years. She spoke about family, about unity, about how misunderstandings happen. Her words felt rehearsed, like lines practiced in front of a mirror. I listened without interrupting, noticing how she never once apologized. Finally, she leaned forward. "Your brother is struggling. He needs guidance, connections." There it was. I met her eyes. "You mean access?" Her lips pressed together. "We're family." That word used to control me. Now it sounded hollow. "I built my life alone," I said quietly. "You didn't help. You didn't ask. You watched." She reached for my hand. I moved it away. "I'm not punishing anyone," I continued. "I'm protecting myself." For the first time, her composure cracked. "You're being selfish." I smiled, calm and unashamed. I learned that from surviving. The cafe noise faded as she stared at me, realizing something she never expected. I wasn't desperate anymore. I wasn't begging for approval. I was choosing distance. Later that week, my brother called. His voice was different, less confident. "I hear you're doing really well." "I am," I said. He hesitated. "I could use some advice, maybe an introduction or two." I closed my eyes briefly. I remembered every time I had asked for support and received silence instead. "I don't mix family and work." I replied. "That's cold," he said. "No," I corrected. "That's clear." After the call, I sat alone in my apartment, the city glowing outside my window. I expected guilt to arrive. It didn't. Instead, there was peace, solid, earned. I understood something powerful then. People who abandon you in your becoming will always return for the results. They want the fruit without respecting the roots. Days later, an invitation arrived. A family event, formal, public, the kind where appearances matter more than truth. My name printed neatly at the top, like I'd never been erased. I held the envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of the choice inside it. They didn't know who I was now, they didn't know what I'd built, and they definitely didn't know what would happen if I showed up. I set the invitation down on the table, heart steady, mind clear. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of facing them. I was curious, because this time, I wouldn't be the one shrinking in the room. I almost didn't go. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew exactly what walking into that room would change. The venue was grand in the way money tries to look important. Crystal lights, polished floors, conversations floating like smoke, pretending to be warm. I arrived alone, dressed simply, deliberately, no labels, no excess. Just quiet confidence stitched into every step. When I entered, I felt it immediately. The pause. Heads turned, whispers followed. Someone said my name like a question, unsure if they were allowed to say it out loud. I walked forward anyway, shoulders relaxed, heart steady. My mother saw me from across the room. Her smile froze. She hadn't imagined me like this. She had pictured hesitation, maybe humility. Someone grateful to be invited back. What she saw instead was a woman who no longer asked permission to exist. She approached me first, her voice soft but strained. "You came?" "I was invited," I said. She laughed lightly, the sound brittle. "Of course, we're so glad." Her eyes searched my face, looking for cracks. There were none. Relatives surrounded us slowly, curiosity pulling them closer. Questions followed. "Where do you live now? What do you do?" "You've changed so much," I answered politely, briefly. "I didn't perform." I didn't explain. Then my brother joined us. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, trying to match my calm and failing. "I didn't think you'd actually show up," he said. "I didn't come for you." I replied. The truth landed harder than any insult. We stood in silence until someone announced a toast. Glasses raised, compliments exchanged. Success praised, but only when it belonged to the right people. I noticed how often my name was avoided, like it might disrupt the narrative, or then someone else said it. Colleague, unexpected. You didn't tell us she was the one behind the project. The room. Tilted. Eyes turned again, sharper this time. My mother's head snapped toward me. What project? I met her gaze. The one your donors are celebrating tonight. The silence that followed was heavy, real, I explained calmly, no boasting. Just facts, the role I played, the contracts I signed, the work I led. I watched understanding replace confusion on faces that once dismissed me. My brother's jaw tightened. My mother's hands trembled slightly. This wasn't the reunion they planned. This was exposure. Later she pulled me aside, voice urgent. Why didn't you tell us? I held her stare. You never asked? She swallowed. We could have supported you. I shook my head gently. You could have. You chose not to. That was the moment it clicked for her. She didn't lose me because I was weak. She lost access because she underestimated me. The event continued, but the energy had shifted. People spoke to me differently now. Respect replaces indifference quickly. When status enters the room, as I prepared to leave, my brother stepped in front of me. We should talk? About what? I asked. He hesitated. About use, I smiled, not unkindly. That conversation needed to happen years ago. I walked out alone, the cool night air wrapping around me like approval I no longer needed, behind me. The room buzzed with confusion, reassessment, regret. They had invited me to remind me of where I came from. Instead, they witnessed where I had arrived, and as I stepped into the dark, phone vibrating in my hand with a new message from my mother, I knew the hardest part was still coming. I used to think winning meant watching them regret everything. I was wrong. The morning after the event, I woke up calm in a way that felt unfamiliar. No shaking hands, no racing thoughts, just quiet. The kind that comes when something heavy finally loosens its grip on your chest. My phone was full, missed calls, long messages, apologies dressed up as explanations. My mother's name appeared the most. I didn't open any of them at first. I made tea. I sat by the window. I let the sun touch my face like proof that time had moved on without their permission. For years, I imagined this moment differently. I imagined anger spilling out of me, words sharp enough to wound back. I imagined standing tall while they shrank. Instead, I felt tired, not weak tired, finished tired. I finally opened my mother's message. It was long, emotional, carefully written. She spoke about fear, about pressure, about how she thought she was protecting the family. She said she never meant to hurt me. I believe that part, but intent doesn't erase impact. I typed slowly, choosing honesty over cruelty. I don't need apologies that come after success. I needed trust when I had nothing. I didn't send it right away. I reread it. I removed anger. I removed blame. I kept the truth. Then I pressed send. That was it. No dramatic confrontation. No public breakdown. Just clarity. Later that day, my brother showed up unannounced. I opened the door and saw guilt written all over his face. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, internally. I owe you, he said. I nodded. You do. He waited for me to say more. I didn't think you'd actually make it, he admitted. I thought you'd disappear. I leaned against the doorframe. You didn't think I mattered, he flinched. That's not, it is, I said quietly, and that's okay. You don't get to rewrite it now. Silence stretched between us. I don't want anything from you, I continued. Not approval, not guilt, just distance. He looked relieved and hurt at the same time. Can we ever be normal? He asked. I thought about it, about family dinners, forced smiles, old wounds reopening. Maybe, I said, but not today. When he left, I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter. That evening I dressed up, not for anyone else, but because I wanted to. I went out alone, ordered dinner for one, laughed at something stupid on my phone, lived in a way that didn't revolve around proving anything. I realized something Important then, they would always see my growth as a surprise. I had lived it every day. I didn't need them to understand the nights I cried in silence, the mornings I doubted myself, the years I built something from nothing while carrying the weight of being dismissed by my own blood. I didn't win because they finally saw me. I won because I stopped waiting for them to. A week later, my mother called again. Her voice was softer, this time less defensive. "More real. I miss you," she said. I closed my eyes. I miss who I was before I had to be strong. She didn't respond. "I'm not cutting you off," I added. "But I'm not stepping back into old patterns either." She whispered, "I understand." I hoped she did. I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. That night I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself properly. Not the version they doubted. Not the version that begged to be chosen. Just me. Whole, steady, unapologetic. I didn't get revenge. I got peace. And as I turned off the light, ready to sleep without ghosts tugging. At my past I knew this: some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end with freedom. Freedom didn't arrive loudly. It slipped in quietly, like breath returning after years underwater. Months passed. Not the dramatic kind filled with confrontations or revelations, but ordinary days stitched together by choice. I chose what to wear without worrying who would comment. I chose silence without guilt. I chose joy without permission. For the first time, my life wasn't a reaction. I moved into a new place across town. Small, sunlit, imperfect. The walls were bare at first, but they felt honest. No memories echoing through corners. No expectations hanging in the air. Just space that belonged to me. On the first night, I slept on the floor with a blanket and laughed at myself. "This is yours," I whispered. "All of it." Work grew busier, better, not because I was chasing validation, but because I finally had room to focus. People noticed. Opportunities followed. Compliments came without conditions attached. I accepted them without shrinking. One afternoon, a colleague said, "You have a calm confidence about you." I smiled. I earned it. At home, I started writing again. Not emails, not explanations. Pages filled with thoughts I had swallowed for years. Anger I never voiced. Love I misplaced. Hope I almost abandoned. Sometimes I cried while writing. Sometimes I laughed. Both felt like healing. My family existed at a distance now. Occasional updates, neutral messages, careful conversations. We were learning each other again, slowly, like strangers who shared history but not intimacy. My mother sent photos once. Old memories. Childhood moments where I looked happy and unaware. I stared at one picture for a long time. I wish I could protect. "You," I murmured to that younger version of myself. "But I can honor you. I didn't go back. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Then came the invitation. A family gathering, casual, polite, framed like an olive branch. I held the card in my hands, feeling the familiar tug of obligation try to rise. "You don't have to," I told myself out loud, and I meant it. I declined gently. "No excuses, no lies. I'm not ready," I wrote. "And I may never be. Please respect that." They did. Or at least they didn't push. That was new. That night I went out with friends who knew me as I was, not as who I used to be. We laughed. Too loudly, stayed out too late. Took photos I didn't worry about editing or explaining. Someone raised a glass and said, "To you, you're different lately." I clinked my glass. "I'm myself lately." Later, walking home alone, I felt something strange. Pride. Not the loud, defensive kind. The quiet kind that settles in your chest and stays. Weeks later, I ran into someone from my past. Someone who knew the old version of me. The one who overgave. The one who apologized for existing. They looked surprised. "You seem changed," they said carefully. I met their eyes. "I am." They hesitated. "You seem happy." I nodded. "I am." They didn't know what to say after that. Neither did I. We parted without nostalgia. Without bitterness. Just closure. That night I stood on my balcony and looked at the city lights. So many lives unfolding at once. So many stories colliding and separating. I thought about everything I had survived. Everything I had unlearned. Everything I had rebuilt from scratch. I didn't become hard. I became clear, clear about what I deserve, clear about what I will never tolerate again, clear about who gets access to my heart. My phone buzzed once. A message. From an unknown number. I see you now, it read. I didn't before, I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, then I locked my phone and set it down. Some apologies arrived too late to matter. As I went inside, closing the door behind me, I realized the final truth of it all. The real ending wasn't them being shocked. It wasn't regret. It wasn't revenge. It was this life, quiet, full, untouched by their expectations. They don't get to witness it. They don't get to comment on it. They don't get to take credit for it. This part of my story belongs only to me. And as I turned off the lights, smiling at the silence instead of fearing it, I knew if they ever look for me again, they won't find the girl they broke. They'll find a woman who moved on.